Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Ohio Association of County Behavioral Health Authorities' first ever. This is our first virtual conference. Let me tell you personally, I miss being with you. I loved our recovery conferences. I always had so much fun. It was my favorite time of the year. So I'm really sorry we can't do it in person, but I'm really happy that we have an opportunity to do it with you virtually. You know, I think this is a great way for us to connect with the recovery community. We're going to have a series of these. This is our first one. We're going to be doing them every month now. And we're just really thankful that we can do this. And we're happy that we can do it virtually, even if we can't do it in person. You know, I love to celebrate recovery is beautiful. And if I was there, I'd be saying recovery is, and you'd all say beautiful. And we'd be having so much fun. But we're going to have fun this way, and we're going to learn some new skills. You know, before we kick things off, and you're going to hear from her in a little bit, but I so have to thank Director Lori Chris from the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. It's really thanks to them and their generous grant that we're able to do this. Cardinal Health has supported us as well, but Director Chris has been such a great supporter of recovery that I know she wanted to make sure we were doing something. So I do really want to thank her. Again, this is our first one. We're going to be having them every month. We'll tell you towards the end of this session about our next two that we're going to have. We're very excited about them. But we always like to get started. You know, it is so important when we do recovery stories that we hear from individuals in recovery, because that's really what this is all about. And I think we're going to have a great story for you today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from them. So we're going to start with Anthony. And Anthony, we're going to let you share your story. So thank you so much, Anthony. We really appreciate you being on our inaugural virtual recovery session. Unmute, Anthony. There we go.
There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Anthony T, and I'm a person in recovery. I'd like to thank Sherry, Michaela, the Ohio Association of County Behavioral Health Authorities, Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services, Cardinal Health, you know, for making this all possible and giving me the opportunity to share my experience, strength, and hope, you know, of recovery. I want to shout out to my boss, Amy Whitmore, Kevin Runyon, for their support and believing in me as well. As I said, my name is Anthony T. I have 15 days, 7 months, and 11 years clean today. I keep track of that. It's important to me. And so now I'll tell you a little bit about, you know, kind of how it was and you know, and where I'm at now. But before I do that, I'd like to say, because I am a big advocate of support services, AA, NA, and you know, I'm part of the organization of Narcotics Anonymous. And I like to say that, you know, an addict, any addict, can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. Our message is hope with the promise of freedom. When all is said and done, our primary purpose can only be to carry the message to the addict who still suffers, because that's all we have to give. Okay, so it's really exciting. I'm nervous. You know, thank you, Sherry and Michaela. You guys have been great and helping me be more nervous. Anyway, coming from a person that, you know, I came from a nice family, a great family. You know, I never intended on having the struggle or challenge, you know, of dealing with drugs. I know that, you know, my parents did the best that they could for me. For us, I had 5 siblings, you know, and it was all a process. Everything we do is a process. You know, just to talk a little bit about how it was and where I came from. You know, you're talking to a person that used to sleep up under bridges in abandoned cars, you know, on the back porch. A person that used to hurt his family repeatedly. You know, and my family, you know, they didn't understand addiction. And they would love me to death. And I mean, literally, I mean, like, my manipulation tactics would, you know, support them loving me, you know, to a place where I can kill myself. going through and having this process and continuously hurting my family, we would have what we would call in recovery, what do we call it? We called it moments of clarity. Moments where when I would say to my mother or my significant other, you know, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. It's over, you know, and I would be so sincere, so authentic, so genuine in saying that. And they would accept me back into the family and give me another chance. And it was crazy because I didn't have a problem stopping. My problem was staying stopped. That was my issue. You know, I had no problem with, and the justice system was played a part in that, and I'll get into that, but I had no problem with stopping for a while and getting healthy and jumping right back into it. You know, I never knew about the lifestyle and the environment. You know, when they would say in recovery meetings, they would say, you know, you only have to change one thing, and that's everything, you know. And at this time of you know, I like to call it my epiphany, you know, this was like the fourth, I had been incarcerated on different occasions. And, you know, it was one time I was incarcerated and I had just gotten married. And, you know, I was mad at everybody. I didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want to talk to my mom. I didn't want to talk to my wife. I just couldn't figure it out, you know. And I remember going to Lorraine Institution. And I remember being in my cell, and I remember having this conversation with God. And I remember me thinking, you know, every time I come to jail, it was because of drugs, trying to get drugs, or it was something to do with drugs, you know. And for that moment, you know, I thought, man, maybe it is the drugs. But, you know, as time went on, I found out drugs are only a symptom of the disease of addiction. And that, you know, from that point on, coming out, well, my recovery started in an institution. I got my first sponsor in an institution. I started working steps in an institution. I was surrounded by older guys who were in an institution and who were supportive and encouraging, you know, telling me I don't have to waste my life. You know, and I still had the thought, like, you know, these guys are crazy because I don't know anybody who doesn't get high. Long story short, I got into treatment. I did the cognitive behavior therapy group. I got my first year clean, incarcerated. After I got that first year clean, it was time to come home. And it's so scary because when it was time to come home, I didn't want to come home. I remember looking at my counselor and saying, is there any way I can stay here? Because it was the first time I felt safe in an institution, right? I felt safe. Like I didn't want to come home because I didn't know anybody who didn't get high. My experience of getting clean and sober wasn't coming home because everybody I knew used drugs. And so anyway, I remember looking at my counselor and saying that, and her saying to me, the only way you can stay here is if you break the law again. And I remember her saying, what do you want to do? I'm like, I always wanted to go to school. You know, and it's funny because in our literature that we read and it helps us learn who we are, it says when an addict puts down the drugs and works the program, old dreams awaken and new possibilities arise, right? And so I would never think to myself, because my disease works on me, I would never think to myself I could go to school and get an education. You know, everything's a process, you know, life experiences. And I know I've learned that most people who haven't had an experience, including myself, most of the time they don't believe you. So when people were saying to me, you can get clean and sober, I thought they were using drugs because I had never had that experience. I never thought that, right? And so I remember coming home and isolating, staying in the house, keeping the door locked. Just when somebody knocked, that I knew I would only crack the door open and peek out, you know, because I didn't want to get high. I didn't miss getting high. I had the motivation and I had the motivating to stay clean and sober. I don't think people really know what it's like when you're caught up in active addiction. You hear the stories, right? People tell you when you see people do things, right? They have this thing on TV, but the TV and the people telling the stories can never tell you or explain to you the emotional chaos and destruction that a person in recovery has to go through. It can be devastating, traumatizing. It can be traumatizing. But I went through these things and I began to meet people. I remember going to school and I began to meet people. And I remember going to school and having this experience that I wanted to go to school for social work. And I remember my sponsor telling me, he's like, just go in and be honest. And I went in and I was honest and I told this advisor, hey, I just got out of jail. You know, I want to get my life on track. I want to go to school. And she's looking at my paperwork and she looks at me and she says, you might as well not go to school. You're not going to be able to get a job anywhere except the factory with your background. Kind of like here I am, just clean a year. I'm out in society and now I'm taking these challenges and they're really challenging. You know what I mean? As a man, because my pride and ego jumps up. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'll fix this. I'll go to school long enough to get the check and then I'll get the check and I'll go back to my old lifestyle. But I forgot about the conversation I had with God upon arriving at Lorraine Correctional Institution. And I was asking for his help. Anyway, I did the thing. I went to school. I went to North Central. And I can never count the blessings. And I don't have enough time to tell you about them all. But I'll tell you about it as many as I can that I think that are essential, you know, with this part of my story that I'm telling. And I remember going to school. And I remember meeting these instructors that worked in social work. And I remember telling them my story. And I remember telling them about their supervisor. And they was like, don't pay her no attention. Don't worry about that. You're doing great. And by the time I got my check, I had all A's. I had built another support group. And I had met some people who believed in me and told me that I can do better. And from that point, I began, because I used to struggle with God. I didn't used to believe in God. And so from that point, I began that, okay, I see God. I see how you are. Oh, you work through people. Because I used to wait for him to like open the clouds up and come down and say, hey, this is what we're about to do. You know, but that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And I know people come to recovery, all different avenues, bridges, lanes. Everybody comes to the recovery a different way. My way was just through incarceration, because that was the only time he was able to sit me down and I was able to talk to something that I never believed in. And so, and more things, like I said, not only sleeping up under bridges, in abandoned cars, not being able to go home, you know, stealing from my family. You know, there were so many things that I did that I didn't want to go back to. And so when I came home, my family didn't believe, because they only remembered the old Anthony. They didn't know this new guy. So when I said to them, I'm done, I'm really done, I had used that multiple times and they didn't believe that. So time, you know, there's a process in recovery, and there's a healing for both me and my family. And I had to heal, and I had to learn to let them be where they are. And I had to be more, show them who I am than tell them who I am. And I've learned that, not only in recovery, but also in my professional role that I have now. I've learned not to be so judgmental. I mean, like, after all those things that I went through, now that, and I had like maybe like 120,000 in debt for child support. You know, 38 years old, I never had my own apartment. You know what I mean? My children despise me. You know, and then coming into a better way of life, you know, with new experiences and supports, you know, the people that you used to know, when you begin to see them, some of them would be like, hey, good job, you know, and others would be like, don't worry, you'll be back. And that was in recovery. You know what I mean? And even in the professional, everybody isn't on board with people in recovery. I'm not just going to talk about, you know, people that, you know, in active addiction, or the old people, but there are people that are so supportive on a professional realm as well. You know what I mean? I had so much to learn about Anthony, you know, removing my pride and ego, being supportive, helping others, knowing my own value and my own self-worth. You know, now here I have like I said, when I got my own place, I left my wife because she kept using. I couldn't do it. And I remember her telling me, it's funny how God works. I remember saying to her, honey, I can't be around this. You can't keep doing this. And I remember her looking at me and saying to me in the same sentence, where are you going to go? nobody trusts you. Nobody wants you around. And then she said, the last thing she said was, keep going to those meetings. Go be with those people. And that's what I did, you know? It's funny how God worked. And I give it all to God. People say, how did you do that? I don't know anybody that done this, Anthony. You know, how did you do this? And I say, it wasn't me. I got out of the driver's seat and I started letting God drive, and I have faith that it can work. You know, I moved my pride and my ego out. I began to ask for help. Some of our most intelligent people in our country got where they are by asking for help. And like I was saying, I had like $120,000 in child support debt. And, you know, I remember getting a job as a recruiter at North Central State College. And I remember we would have these fairs. We would be at the fair, and I would see the mother of my children. And, you know, at first they would like, no, don't talk to me, yada, yada. And my sponsor would say, continue to be kind and nice. Long story short, the 120,000, after they saw how I was working my recovery and how serious I was about it, and that I didn't want to go back to that lifestyle, they went and signed off on that. You know what I mean? Like, this is the things like amazes me. You know what I mean? I still don't have the best credit, but you know, I don't owe child support, and I'm spending time with my kids. I remember being at a meeting one time and sharing that, you know, I wonder how it would be to raise a kid. You know, the God of my understanding is he has a sense of humor. 2 years ago, I got custody of my 9-year-old son. And so now I'm a single parent. And so I take my hat off to all single mothers, because now I know what you do and what you deal with, the challenge, the different things that we learn, And the most challenging thing that I've had to deal with is in recovery is myself. Because there's so many times, that I had to learn that, you know, even though I see things that go on outside of me, I want to sometimes just control them, you know, and I can't. And I have to let things be the way they are. And I have to learn from my experiences. And I have to continue to be positive. And I have to continue to have faith, you know. And I have to continue to let people be people. Real quick, and I'm gonna end this. Because of, you know, COVID, we don't get to do as many support groups. And right before COVID, I remember a job I had as a director at an agency here in Mansfield. And there was a lady in there. I had helped her, and she had gotten better. And she's like, Anthony, I really want you to help my husband. I said, well, get him to come in. And she said, but you're Black. I said, what? She said, but you're Black. I said, what does that have to do with anything? She said, well, he has swastikas and he's racist. I said, really? I said, well, I don't hold that against him. I said, was he born that way? She said, no, he probably learned it. Somebody taught him. I said, well, if he wants to come in and talk to me, I would love to talk to him. Long story short, he came in and talked to me. And he told me that he had an experience when he had gotten into some trouble and he joined the wrong people. And he said, man, I've never known that people like you exist. And I just wanted to share that because of some of the things that we're going through in our country. You know, people aren't born the way that they are. I don't get mad at people anymore, but I do let people be who they want to be. I know that happiness is much more healthier for me than being angry, upset, envious, or jealous of anybody. You know, again, like I said, I hope that I was able to share something to give somebody a shot of hope. Recovery is real, man. It is so real, and it works miracles. Miracles, they are real. Thanks to everybody for listening to me. That's all I got. I pass.
Thanks, Anthony. I have no doubt if we were sitting at the Hyatt and you were up on stage, you'd be getting a standing O right now. So this is your standing O, because that was a great story. Thank you for sharing. I know that was hard. But you know, it's through sharing our stories that we really can make a difference in people's lives. So thank you for sharing a hard story and bearing your soul there a little bit. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to encourage folks, you know, make sure you stay till the very end after Wendy talks, because you know how we give a lot of prizes away. Well, we might have a surprise at the end of this session, so you want to hang in there. So make sure you hang on for the entire meeting. So it really is my pleasure next to introduce someone who I consider a friend. I've worked with her for a really long time. I think she's doing a great job at the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And I think what's so important is she really understands recovery. She's been working in this field for a really long time. And I think that is so important. And she brings that to the table, you know, every time we talk about things. So again, I want to thank Lori and all her staff for all the support and their focus on recovery and supporting these recovery conferences. So I'd like to introduce to you all Lori Chris, the Director of the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Thanks, Lori.
Thank you so much, Sherry. It really is, you know, my pleasure to serve and to bring the experiences that I've had since 1994. And most of my experiences have been really sitting with and listening to and learning from the experience and strength and hope of people in recovery. And I know how much it's enriched my life, and I do want to be a voice for that at the state government level and the federal government, and to support all of your working communities. I want to thank Anthony for sharing your story. It was beautiful, that the courage and the grace and that you share, you know, just by being open to tell your story is so appreciated. And it really, you know, inspires me to keep doing our work at the department. Looking forward to hearing Wendy too. And I do want to thank Sherry and the whole team at OACBHA for all that you're doing to keep this recovery conference going. It is such a great community that we have here in Ohio. And I know there's well over 100 folks logged in today. It's not the same as being in the ballroom together, but any chance we can spend together is a good thing. So today I'm just going to highlight some of the great work of the team of the department that we're doing in connection and collaboration, and talk a little bit about the pandemic too. It's certainly on everyone's mind. So we'll get started jumping right in. I'm really grateful to work for Governor Mike DeWine because he understands recovery too. And so it was a natural fit to be able to work, to be invited to work and serve in his cabinet. He really does believe that there needs to be access to treatment, but understands that not everybody's path to recovery involves treatment, and that treatment is not 100% of the experience. So building recovery-friendly communities and supporting the health and wellness of Ohioans through prevention, treatment, and recovery is a top priority of him and his administration, including me. Next slide. One of the things that I have really found a great foundation in is Samsa's definition of recovery, and this is the definition that we use at the department, knowing that for someone to really live full potential, it requires physical, emotional, spiritual health, also a safe and healthy and supportive place to call home, a sense of purpose in day-to-day life, and that connection to community beyond myself, that understanding of myself within the broader community. And I think this is what we all need to be healthy and well. And I think it's a great way to think about recovery and our approaches to it as we do this work. Next slide. So at the department, there are three main areas that we focus on, the first being peer support, the second housing, and the third employment, as part of our recovery supports and services portfolio. And we have a team that's dedicated on that, and then specialists in each of the areas. With peer support, I think Ohio is doing phenomenal work. There's been such an elevated interest in and understanding of and movement with the recovery community in peer support. And we're continuing to build on the strengths and all of the work that's been done, the great foundational work, and to help take it to the next level in terms of building workforce and creating those opportunities for recovery community organizations and for peer supporters in different environments, whether it be hospitals or criminal justice, treatment centers, community programming, just a great opportunity. We're doing a couple of things here. Since the pandemic started, we've had calls at least weekly with the recovery community organizations and peer supporters, and really thinking about and listening to the needs and the ideas and potential solutions for making sure that peer support and recovery community organizations and peer-run organizations are supported and the vitality of these organizations continues now and into the future. So we've been doing a lot in supporting access to technology, making sure meetings are still happening. We're also working on updating our approach to training the peer support workforce through our e-based academy, some diversification efforts with Spanish-speaking virtual trainings, and also a curricula that's been developed for youth and families by NAMI that we're working alongside of them and in our peer support opportunities through some federal dollars we have and with our peer support team. So really looking at how youth and then family members can provide support to other youth or to other family members. So lots of great stuff happening here with this team. In our housing team, we have a lot of focused work happening. An updated environmental scan of recovery housing is underway, did some deep dive work in the mid 2010s, and now we're updating that to see really what the state of recovery housing is now, where it needs to go. Diving into some committee work around adult care facilities and how to make sure that residents there have quality experience and that the operators are supported and resourced in a way that can promote that. And also some COVID specific work here too. Really appreciate the ability to work with the Adult Care Facility Association, Ohio Recovery Housing, OACBHA, and making sure that cleaning supplies and PPE were distributed to housing environments across the state to make sure that residents have safe places to live and to be well. And then we've also improved some of the technology related to our residential state supplement, the dollars that are used for people with severe mental illness who are living in adult care facilities. So lots of good and creative work that we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here. Next slide. And then our employment strategies are in full swing too, and looking at employment really as that way, one way that a person with lived experience, a person in recovery might connect to their purpose. Sometimes it's parenting or taking care of a family member, older adult, sometimes it's volunteering, sometimes it's employment opportunities. So this program is really focused on supporting individuals in recovery and exploring what their employment goals are and helping connect to meaningful employment opportunities. And we're piloting the expansion of that in our state hospitals so that those residents of our hospitals, the patients in our hospitals, have access to this recovery support in addition to the peer support that they get. We also have a financial wellness campaign roundtable, and that's coming up in early November, really looking at how resources are used to promote recovery and how also money can be a trigger and can be something that can really be in many ways dangerous for a person who is in recovery and may not have planned for how to use their resources, and so might have an experience where money is a trigger for relapse. And then also the disability benefits website that helps people understand what benefits are available, how to access them, and how they can continue to work or be engaged in community services and supports while they're receiving these benefits. Next slide. So that was, again, just the tip of the iceberg, but wanted to kind of give a quick high level of where we are with some of the recovery supports work in the department. Also want to talk about the pandemic, and this is an image that I really like because I do think we're all in the same storm. Everybody across Ohio, across the country, across the world is experiencing the pandemic of COVID-19, but not everybody's experiencing it in the same way. And sometimes, you know, some of us might be on that aircraft carrier and feel ready to really weather this storm, and others might feel like they're in a kayak and these waves hit them harder and with more force than maybe some others are feeling it. And so that's what we're paying attention to, and sometimes that waves throughout the day. We know people with pre-existing mental health and substance use disorders, you know, before COVID-19 are in some ways have some resiliencies that can help weather this new storm, but in many ways have some risk factors that can be a concern as well. Next slide. And we knew from the beginning that there would be a surge in emotional distress and mental health issues. We're worried about increasing suicidality and suicide rates, and we saw a surge of overdose deaths in Ohio, with May being the deadliest overdose month that we have on record. And so we know that COVID-19 is certainly an additional challenge. You know, our communities are in the middle of a pandemic, but we were struggling with an epidemic before that. And so we have lots of work underway to help create opportunities for people to get help or to stay engaged in services and supports if they were already engaged in them. Next slide. Some of the things that we started doing just from the very beginning back in actually late February and in March, we started into this work, and we worked a lot with recovery community organizations, peer-run organizations, treatment providers, local boards, family, NAMI organizations, to make sure that we were engaging everyone in this work. Quickly changed our regulations and Medicaid's regulations around telehealth so that people could access care from their homes, could safely be engaged in that stay-at-home order, but still keep access to care, whether that was if they were already in treatment or they needed treatment for the first time for mental health or addiction issues. And also working to create this awareness around mental health and emotional distress as something that's normal to experience, so that we can reduce stigma and let everybody know that behavioral health care is essential and open for business. Made sure that medications were available through increasing take home and working with the federal government on some regulations there, but also making sure there were safe in-person opportunities for people to continue with medications, and to make sure that naloxone was widely available in communities, including mail order naloxone. And then we created easier on-ramps to care, like the Ohio Care Line, which is a 24/7 staffed hotline that people can call to talk about their needs, get some guidance, and get connected to care in local communities. Next slide. So each of us really, you know, can spend some time thinking about some of the unique factors that affect how we're dealing with the pandemic, and you know, maybe we haven't thought about that specifically, but it really is different for each of us, and it's based on our risks and on our resiliencies, the strengths that we have to bring to the situation. Next slide. And these are some of the elements that the research shows us plays into risk and resiliency. Personal background and history, you know, if there's a trauma history and it's undealt with, that might be a risk. But if it's something that you're doing work on and you're healing from, that might be something that brings you strength, because you can apply those lessons to the pandemic as well. If you had co-occurring physical or emotional health issues. Race and ethnicity, we know that race is something that definitely impacts a person's experience with COVID. Minority Ohioans are more impacted by COVID than their non-minority friends and neighbors. And so that's something that Governor DeWine has taken seriously. And then we've also just had the weight of the social justice issues and the police violence against Black Americans, and all of that weighing in and adding stress right now. Social support from family and friends, and this is a big one for the recovery community, how connected you are to other people who are supportive of your goals and your wellness, and how connected you stay, financial situation and community too. Next slide. So, you know, as we look at all of these risk factors, we also think about, you know, the upcoming winter season when more of us will be indoor, and flu season, and the political season we're in, and the racial and social tensions around us, and COVID, and everything's just one more rock laying on top of us. And it's really, really heavy. And we could feel pinned down by this. And I'm not bringing these things up to do that, to make you feel heavier, but to say, you know, we know that all of these things are a reality. And the one thing that I've learned, if I've learned anything from the recovery community, is that living life on life's terms makes a difference. You know, accepting the reality of what I am and not wishing for something different helps me deal with those facts and create a pathway forward. And so that strength and that resiliency that I've learned from the recovery community is something that I think is really important for all of us to remember on a day-to-day basis right now. Next slide. And so that's the message that our department is carrying forth in the world. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to ask for help and deal with life on life's terms. Next slide. here are the signs of distress. And if a person's feeling any of these, whether it's yourself or someone in your family, in your household, in your neighborhood, in your friend group, in your peer group, these are things we should be paying attention to. If we're seeing that, you know, those fear and worries that they just can't shake the thoughts of, they're losing sleep, they're unable to sleep, they're eating too much, they're eating too little, or they're more short-tempered than usual. These are all signs for us that stress is impacting us, and we need to listen to those feelings. Next slide. And then we need to take care of ourselves. So thinking about what are you doing on a day-to-day basis, and how are you supporting not just your family and friends, but yourself, and taking care of yourself. And each of us has that responsibility. Next slide. So I know I look around, I've got at least 4 devices here that are charged or are charging, and I make sure that I can use my phone and my laptop and my iPad at any given moment when I need to grab onto it. And I don't let my batteries run down on my devices, but sometimes I let my batteries run down on myself, right? And so we need to make sure that we're recharging, we're plugging into things that are healthy and give us energy and a sense of wellness. So don't let this wear you down. This is a priority, not a luxury. Next slide. Some things to take care of yourself right now: limit your media exposure and use trusted resources. I know that I can get in the habit pretty easily of checking the Twitter feed right first thing in the morning when I wake up. Last thing I do before I go to bed, I learned a term, doom scrolling, where I'm just going fast to see what's the bad news I need to know. And those are just not healthy things. So have a trusted source and turn the TV off, turn the media off, limit your media exposure. If you're hungry, I love this. I got this from recovery community too. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, just stop. Take care of yourself. If you're hungry, eat something healthy. If you're lonely, don't eat something. Reach out to someone and have a conversation. So this is just a great simple thing all of us can do. And then, you know, do things you enjoy. I think the recovery community also brings forth this sense of gratitude and hopefulness, and call on that and connect to that and stay connected to those healthy relationships that lift you up. Next slide. These are some of the campaigns that we have on our website, and there are many, many more, but our efforts are to make sure that we reach every Ohioan, every Ohio community. So you can see there's diversity and messaging, the Hey I'm Here initiative with young adults and youth, and an opportunity for them to connect to peers. The Life is Better With You, which is a suicide prevention campaign for African-American males. The Got Your Back, which is a campaign that we do with farmers and rural communities, and then working with teachers on the ABCs of mental health too. So these are all great campaigns that are available free. They have videos, they have websites, they have social media art that you can just grab and use. And I hope that you do that with your folks that you're connected to. Next slide. And with that, I'll stop. There's so much more that I'd love to be able to share with you, but hopefully we'll have more times to connect. But really do just want to remind you that stay connected to us, stay connected to each other. These are some opportunities and resources for immediate help if you're feeling like you need that support, either by the crisis text line or the Ohio Care Line. And we look forward to continuing to support your great work and the work of the recovery community. So I will hand it back to Sherry, and thank you again for this great virtual recovery conference, this monthly series, and for the opportunity to work so closely with the recovery community and with you at the association.
Thank you so much, Director Chris, for joining us today. I'm sure everyone at home is giving you a nice round of applause. Next, we're going to move on to our keynote speaker. So Wendy Adamson is a sober woman with over 2 decades of experience in the field of mental health and substance abuse treatment. She currently works with adolescents who are suffering from mental health issues at an inpatient treatment facility in Los Angeles. In her recent memoir, Motherload, Wendy recounts her own struggles with addiction and the long, arduous journey of healing and repair within her family as a result of getting sober. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy, who is here to tell her story.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Ohio, for having me and inviting me, Michaela, Lori, Sherry. Liz, thank you so much. And Tony, thanks. Anthony, thanks for sharing. That was amazing. I'm really impressed by the this platform you have, just focusing on recovery. And it's been a big part of my life for 27 years since I got sober. But I find I can't talk about recovery without talking a little bit about the trauma that I experienced as a kid. You know, trauma, I did grow up in an environment where there was a lot of trauma. My mother was schizophrenic, and as a schizophrenic, she was often suicidal, trying to kill herself, you know, and as kids, you know, we would sometimes get in the way. And growing up in that kind of environment, you know, it's like trauma, they say, can affect, you know, our DNA, because our DNA is reading and transcribing the trauma. You know, the studies now show that it affects the amygdala, which is like, you know, hyper alert. It can affect, you know, the reward pleasure center. You know, all of these areas of the brain. When I was growing up, trauma was like, you know, they're a kid, they'll get over it, you know, they're resilient and just move on. And so no one was addressing the trauma when I was growing up, you know, and all I know as a kid, like from those years of being like terrified of my mother, like wondering who was going to be there when I got home from school, or who was going to be there when I came in from playing outside, you know, because it often felt like, you know, something evil had her eyes. So, you know, I was on hyper alert. The cortisol was running through my bloodstream, you know, and hypervigilance and living in that kind of environment, those kind of stressors. I mean, they have the adverse childhood, the outcomes these days where they can measure these kind of things, but they were not being measured when I grew up. And so, you know, I came to live, in hindsight, a very defended life, on alert, constantly on alert. And, you know, my mother and father were fighting a lot. I don't think he knew what to do. You know, it was not what he had planned when he married his wife, you know, he had 4 kids. We were going to a nice Catholic school. And, you know, this was not in his plans. And so, you know, they would fight a lot. They would drink a lot. And then one night when they got in a fight and he went off to the bar, the local bar, she turned on all the gas in the house. And so when he got back, I was told much years later that when he got back, he put out his cigarette on the porch and stepped inside, and the house, you know, was emanating just gas. And so he called the fire department. My mother was taken away. And from there, she went home to her parents' house and ended up finally succeeded at killing herself when I was 7 years old. And, you know, the way that she killed herself, you know, was an image that would haunt me for years. She cut her wrist and then pulled a big trunk over her in the bathtub. In the trunk were pictures of her children, pictures of her wedding. So it was almost like drowning under her inventory, under her own life. She couldn't deal with her life, so she just, you know, drowned under. But my dad, when he told me, you know, it was like that she had died, he said it was a heart attack, and he said not to tell my younger brother. There was always this element of secrecy within our family system, and within, you know, trauma, you know, they've also learned a lot about intergenerational trauma, that, you know, since when I was growing up, and you know, the impact of trauma. So he told me not to tell anybody. And where is this going? It's like it's being stored in my psyche. It's being stored in my muscles. It's being stored in my body. This fear, you know, this fear. And as a child, you're wondering, somebody please come and get me out of here. You know, get me out of here. You know, it just like, and nobody's coming. Nobody's coming. So in any case, when he told me not to tell my, you know, my brother that about how it was more and just another secret. It was another secret. We didn't go to the funeral. You know, we never got a space. No, we to grieve my mother's death. Instead, my dad went into what I would call an isolation. He moved and he went in, you know, underneath. He lost contact with a lot of our relatives and such. So we were isolated. And in any case, you know, I'm growing up terrified. I'm extremely terrified. I feel alone. I feel like cut off from people. I feel extreme social phobia and all of these feelings that I can't articulate. I can't metabolize, you know. And so when I first got my hands on alcohol, my early teens, it was like, now I know this is what I need. This is what I need to metabolize my fear. This is what I need to be in the world. This is what I need to be in my skin, because I can't deal with the world. And, you know, like when you've experienced trauma, they say that suicide can go up like 12 times, you know, and especially if you have a parent that, you know, commits suicide, which I would find out also in my early teens, the way she died. It was like the secret was let out by our housekeeper, our family housekeeper, that the housekeeper said, I think you guys should know the truth. And she told me and my sister, you know, how my mother died. So, you know, needless to say, I'm pissed off at my dad. I feel betrayed, you know, but the alcohol gave me the ability to deal or be in the world. I think it kind of saved me in a way from killing myself, you know, and not only alcohol, but I would graduate to drugs. I would do drugs alcoholically, as they say. And, you know, I started, you know, very early looking for the effect. I wanted just not to care. I just didn't want to care. I didn't want to feel. I didn't, you know, I wanted out of my body. So needless to say that, you know, it's a progressive disease, you know, it's progressive. And, you know, I did heroin, I did other drugs, and also got in a lot of trouble, like Anthony was talking about. I got caught up in the juvenile system. I became a ward of the court because my dad could no longer handle me. And he just threw up his hands to the judge one day in the juvenile court and said, I can't deal with her. And they took me to Silmar Juvenile Hall, and I was in the system. And once in the system, it's extremely hard to get out of the system. It's really hard to get out of that system. And I was put in foster care, from foster care back to juvenile hall, from juvenile hall to another foster care, back, bouncing around, you know, these different institutions, Camarillo State Hospital, which was where they housed a lot of the kids. And I was a runner. I would run, you know, like when I could, you know, walk off the property of the state hospital, I'd walk off and they'd bring me back. So I was like bouncing around all of these, but nobody is addressing the trauma. This is like not talked about. This is not, you know, addressed. I mean, trauma, you know, I think it started to coming to light when PTSD, when the soldiers were coming back from Vietnam, they started discussing and talking about like, oh, the soldiers are, you know, have shell shock or PTSD. But with kids, like I said, it wasn't being addressed. And so needless to say, I went on like this for like a long time. And I, you know, found somebody that could drink and use like I did. And, you know, I stumbled into him and I kind of stayed there with him, you know, and I tried to, I tried my best at like, this was probably in my early 20s, and the drugs and alcohol are accelerating. They're getting worse. It's getting worse. And towards I'd been to jail. I'd been to civil brand. And the thing about when my mother killed herself, when I found out she had killed herself, I said I would never be like my mother. And it's like, I think saying never be like my mother was like giving the universe the exact coordinates to where I would later land. How we repeat, how that generational trauma keeps repeating itself, because that's where I was headed. And so, I had two boys. I had two sons, Ricky and Jerry, and I wrote about them in my book, Motherload. And I never wanted to be like my mother, but I'm, in and out of getting incarcerated as an adult, and trying to hold it together, and I could go long periods of times where I could actually hold it together if I was on a methadone program, and, but still I had no life skills. I had no way to deal with what was coming down the pike. And as a result, that there's a lot of wreckage and so what happened inevitably is at the end of my drinking and using, I started doing like methamphetamine, and it's like, I'm 38 years old, and my mother was 38 when she killed herself, and I'm 38. I'm doing methamphetamine for days. I'm like not sleeping. I'm staying awake for days, and just constantly, affected by this drug. And I had a psychotic break, and so I become, I become just like my mother. But except it's a drug-induced psychotic break. And my husband at the time was scoring for people, and he was scoring for this girl, and it occurred to me he's cheating on me, and I knew it like with every fiber of my being. So I waited till he got home that night, and he had gone to cop with her, and when he got home, I grabbed 38 Smith & Wesson and ran outside, and I ended up firing 2 shots. Now, one of those shots hits the other woman in the arm, okay? And, it's like, that's not where I wanted to. When I was growing up, I never thought that was where my life would take me. That's not where I wanted to go. But, that's where drugs and alcohol did take me. I was like completely out of control. I want to read just a couple of paragraphs from my book that talk about when this happened. And when I go back in the house, I change my clothes so the cops won't recognize me, because I figure if I change my clothes in a lineup, there'll be no witnesses. They won't be able to ID me, So I headed for the bedroom, where I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, my breath nearly jackknife. My brown hair was all disheveled, the bones in my face all sharp edges, and I was hunched over. My eyes were like 2 dead vacant pools, and my skin was sallow gray. It was jarring how much I looked like my mother had whenever she would go insane. A familiar darkness grabbed me like fingers around my throat. I wanted to stop the madness, but had no idea how. I flinched when I heard a noise outside. I opened the front door, and when I stepped onto the porch, I was blinded by a dozen spotlights pointing their fingers like accusations. Hands in the air, a disembodied voice yelled from behind the glare. The Catholic girl residing in me did exactly what she was told, as a stampede of Lomita sheriffs surrounded me. It all happened fast after that. One of them cuffed my hands while another patted me down, and others rushed into the apartment. My legs shook like a high-strung chihuahua. A scruffy looking cop slipped paper baggies over my hands and then manila envelopes over that. What's going on? What's going on? I asked. A young cop secured the envelopes around my wrist with duct tape. My son is asleep in there. A cop yelled inches from my face, "Shut up." I flinched. I felt like I might pass out. I was put in the back seat of the squad car, and I looked down at those strange appendages resting on my lap. I realized the cops were trying to keep the gunpowder intact as evidence. I grabbed the corner of my envelope and with teeth started ripping, tearing, spitting scraps of paper off on the floor. I was like a trapped animal, determined to get free. Finally, I broke through the plastic baggies and started licking my hands and fingers. I was no dummy. I know how to outsmart those cops. In a frenzy, when I went to the front door, the squad car flew open. A good-looking cop peered through the thick mesh screen. "Look, Wendy, why don't you just tell us where you put the gun? We'll go a lot easier on you if you cooperate." Under the leaves by the back porch, the words just rolled right off my tongue. "You clearly wouldn't want to drop me behind enemy lines." He ran off like a school kid picked for the winning team. When I thought about my sons, Jerry and Ricky, my heart sank to my feet. Oh my God, oh shit, what have I done? What the fuck have I done? So that's where I ended up. And I wanted to read that page because I sometimes need to be taken back and to remember what it was like, the insanity. I was my mother. I was insane. But once you lose your mind, how the hell do you get it back? You know, and of course I went to jail. I got a year in the county jail. And I want to say, you know, like since the 1980s, like incarcerated women it's increased like 700%. And of those women, 60% of them have children under 18. And, you know, I'm just talking about the women here. So all of the children, all of the intergenerational trauma that is being passed down. And for families with limited economic means, like Black or Latinos families, they don't, you know, they don't have the resources. I didn't have the resources then. And, you know, it's very impressive what Ohio is doing for people that, you know, are incarcerated and getting the knowledge out there about addiction and, you know, about recovery being available. Because, you know, I really didn't know. When I was in the county jail in Sybil Brand, I didn't think my bandwidth for life experience was so narrow that I only had this narrow bandwidth that had been about drugs, had been about alcohol, it had been about like, you know, running. It had been about running my entire life. But there were, you know, I was in the county jail and it was like, you know, my life was over. I was leveled. But I'd been leveled before, you know, seemingly leveled before. But at this time, there was something different, you know. I realized that my entire life, I was blaming everybody. I was blaming my mother for being a schizophrenic. I was blaming my dad for being alcoholic. I was blaming my husband for cheating on me. And the only language I spoke was victimese. You don't understand. You don't understand. It's their fault. And then I realized at some point, because in jail you have you get a lot of time to think. And I suddenly realized, like, I'm breaking my own heart. I'm disappointing my children. It's me. As long as I'm blaming everybody else, I'm giving my power away, you know? And so in the county jail, I was, you know, they didn't have a lot of resources for parents, and they didn't have a lot of resources for women. But one thing, I was sentenced to parenting classes. And it was during one of these parenting classes that I watched that really was kind of like a shift. They showed these 3 families going through divorce and the effects it had on the mother, the effects it had on the children, children, the husband, the effects it had on the whole family system. And they interviewed these 3 families at one point and then came back 5 years later to see where they were at. You know, and all of the families, all of the mothers, all of the fathers were stuck in the same spin, except for one woman. Okay, so they were all unhappy. The kids were acting out with drugs and alcohol. The kids were circling the drain, all except for this one woman and her son. And the interviewer asked her, like, you seem different than the last time we met 5 years ago. And she goes, I am. She goes, I've moved on. She goes, I was depressed. I was like, my friend was concerned about me. I didn't know what to do. She said I needed to go see my pastor. So the woman, out of complete desperation, went to see her pastor. And she told the pastor all the terrible things her husband, you know, had done and cheating on her. And I'm relating, you know, suddenly I'm listening to this woman who, and her experience, because I'm identifying, all right, I'm identifying to her experience. And that pastor said, you know, you need to pray for him. Just pray for him. Did you hear anything I just said? Just, are you tired of being angry? She said, yes. And I identified with that. I was tired of being angry. I was tired of being pissed off and blaming everybody in my life. So he told her to say this prayer: thank you, God, for giving my children the best father that he could be. And I was desperate enough. I said, you know, I don't know if it'll work. It worked for her. She said it worked for her and she moved on. So I was desperate enough in the county jail to try it. And every time I started having like images of getting out there and paying him back for everything, I would say that prayer. Thank you, God, for giving my children the best father that he could be. I said it over and over again in my head like a chant. Did I believe it? Nope, I didn't believe it. Did I feel it? I didn't feel it. Thank you, God, for giving my children the best father that he could be. I said it anyway because I wanted relief. I was desperate, and that prayer worked. Something slipped from here to my heart that I had to shift. I had to shift. And it wasn't huge. I didn't transcend humanity or anything. There was no chariot in the sky or burning bush. But I thought, if I could get sober, that would be the best way to pay him back, is just get sober, you know? And I didn't have an idea of success. But at that point in county jail, there was no re-entry into life outside of the jail. There was no counselors going, Wendy, what are you going to do when you get out? What are you going to do with your life? Do you know where you're going to go? Do you know how are you going to be a mother? How are you going to raise your kids? There was nobody there. Somebody suggested I go to the chaplain, and chaplain gave me a big book of county resources that said, you can look through that. I had no idea where to start. Where do I go? Well, I believe that, you know, now I believe that, you know, God speaks through people as people in, you know, people. And this woman that taught self-esteem class, little did I know, I found out, I started going to these self-esteem classes. Lord knows, in county jail, I needed a little bit of self-esteem. And so I would go to her classes, and I found out she sometimes helped sponsor people when they were getting out of the county jail. So I told her I had nowhere to go. I said, I have a son, and my oldest son is in the juvenile hall. He's in juvenile hall now. He was 16, my son Jerry. And it's, again, the intergenerational trauma. I'm living my mother's life. My sons are living my life. The history is being passed down, that trajectory. So how do you change the trajectory of alcoholism, addiction, mental illness to one of healing and recovery? Slowly, one step at a time. But this woman that taught self-esteem classes sponsored me. And then she picked me up when I had no one to pick me up. from jail and took me to a hotel. I picked up my youngest son, who was with his grandmother, and he was angry and had every right to be, just like I was pissed off at my mom and pissed off at my dad. And it would be a long road of recovery. But I went to Claire Women and Children's Center the next day and had an interview. Claire is a foundation here in Los Angeles that helps those that don't have insurance, that don't have resources to get. So I got a start there. I took my youngest son and, but here I was in recovery, and I was watching people recover and do these things that I had no idea how to do. It's like, oh, that's fine for you. That's great for you. I'm so happy for you. You don't understand. I'm terminally unique. I come from severe trauma with a capital T, I'm glad that's working for you. So it was like, getting clean with people and talking like this, when you're come from a childhood of secrecy and don't tell anybody about your mom, don't talk about it outside the home. You are sworn into that conspiracy of silence. So talking about, and then in the environments of growing up in institutions like juvenile hall, and I've been to prison, I've been to jail, growing up in all of those, you live a defended life. So when I first got sober, I couldn't talk about where I had been or what I had done, but that image that she showed earlier with all the rocks piled on top of the head, that was me. That was me. I was unwilling to drop the rocks and swim for the surface and what you need to do in recovery. So in any case, I didn't stay sober initially until on Mother's Day. Something happened. I was my older son gets out of juvenile hall. He wants to come over and crash. I'm living at the Women and Children's Center. My youngest son is asleep in the room. It's 10 minutes to 10. I'm watching The Stand on television, Stephen King's series, The Stand, and I hear 4 gunshots. I look out the blinds, I'm upstairs, I look at up the blinds, and there's someone laying in the street, in the intersection down below my place. And I want to be very clear here that my nature has always been to be selfish, self-centered. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to see blood. I don't want to be there when the cops come, or be inconvenienced in any way. I don't know what it was about that Mother's Day, that night, or why I went to that boy, but I went to that boy. That was somebody's son laying face down in the intersection. He had taken 4 bullet shots. It could have been a drive-by, a drug deal, gone, I don't know. It was the first time I ever did anything or showed up for anybody without an agenda, without going, what's in it for me? I'm going to collect later. They owe me a favor. It was the first time I'd say I had the purity of intention to be there for another human being, someone's son laying in the street, dying. When the cops got there, they thought I was his mother. So I stayed with him as he labored, he was labored breathing, until they figured out I wasn't. They asked me, are you his mom? And I said, no, I live up there. And you get behind the line, lady, and so I got behind the line. But that moment that I was with that boy on my knees, telling him to hang in there, it was like a moment where I felt I just wanted him to live. I felt so like everything stopped, in that moment. And so they took him away in the ambulance, and I went back up to try to go to sleep that night. And I was so anxious. I was so like, what's going to happen? You know, there was just, you know, I wanted to drink. I wanted to go to the liquor store and drink, but there were cops outside. You know, it's just like, so I made a bed next to my youngest son in his bedroom. And while I was laying there, a presence came in the room. And it was a presence that came in through the ceiling and entered my chest. It was, I went from one moment feeling complete anxiety to the next moment feeling an absolute state of peace. Like everything is all right. Everything has always been all right. Everything would be all right. This feeling was absolute. You know, some days I wish I could access that feeling through this COVID virus, you know, that everything is all right. But hearing myself say it, and everything is all right. And that was an experience that got me out of the bleachers, and I would say on the playing field of life. Instead of being an observer and watching other people recover, what I took away from that inevitably is like, I wondered if, was that God, that light that came to me? Was that light? Was that a contrary action of getting out of myself and being there for another human being? It changed me. It changed me by being of service to another suffering human being. I found out later the boy died. I found out the next day. And I don't know if it was a God that came to me or the boy's spirit that came to me. It doesn't matter. It changed me. It changed me. And so after that, I started, you know, things really started taking off. I got off welfare, you know, and I got on AFDC. I mean, I got off AFDC and got a job. But during that time on welfare, I do want to talk about, you know, this, you know, when I still like was feeling guarded and like I, you know, couldn't afford to buy my son Ricky any shoes. This one woman that had been alumni of Claire Foundation came by one day and offered to buy him 2 pairs of shoes. And it was like really hard for me to accept people's kindness, you know, and like I often say that I have no defense against kindness. I was like, I could defend myself against your harsh words. I could defend myself against cruelty or trauma. I could defend myself. I could run. You know, I have all these trauma responses that I could use, but there was no defense against kindness. And I started to see kindness operating, you know, within this community that I was creating because I started asking for help. You know, all I wanted when I was a little kid, scared to death, was someone to help me, you know, but I couldn't say that. As a result, I puffed myself up and acted like I had my shit, you know, not that I had my shit together, but that I didn't need anybody, that I can do this alone, you know, and I can't do this alone. I can't do this alone. I had to start asking for help. And it was like incredible, like, you know, they started circling the wagons, you know, people started helping me. People just were like unbelievable, like just incredible. I met this one guy that through friends that started mentoring my younger son and started taking him out every week. And, you know, he was just an example of a person that made a difference, made an impact on my son and his life. And then I started to be there for my older son who was struggling with drugs and alcohol. You know, I wanted to just, as, you know, a parent, I wanted to say, I'm sorry, you know, I'll never do that again. But as Anthony said, I had to show them, I had to show my kids, I want to change. I am changing. And that means I am willing to be a present mother. I'm ready to be here for you in every way, whether you go to, like I watched my son go to prison. You know, it's terrifying to wake up in sobriety and see the impact, you know, of and the effect that is created through not having the tools or this, you know, the skills. I wish back then there was recovery was, you know, more of an option when these lower level crimes that before I started, you know, accelerating in my my criminal world, if you would, with weapons. And the thing, it was not being addressed. It was not being addressed. And so, but in recovery, I started, you know, taking risks. You know, I started getting a job. I got off the welfare, and I started being present for my boys, and that became my, you know, besides staying sober, but being present for my boys and living amends to them. I made amends to my ex-husband. I made amends to the woman I shot. You know, and that's not an easy thing to say you're sorry for, you know, but I did it. I showed up and I told her, you know, I was sorry. And, you know, it's been an incredible journey. Like what has happened, you know, when I was in the county jail, I could not have imagined my life looking as it looks like now. I couldn't have imagined. I mean, I wasn't in there doing research for a book. That's not why I was stuck in the system, you know, but that bandwidth has expanded. My experience has expanded. And, you know, what happened, my son, Ricky, and Jerry, you know, I have really great relationships with them, but Ricky, a few years ago was struggling with his, you know, just going through a bottom of his own, not with drugs and alcohol, but he started struggling, didn't know what his purpose was. He was in his early 30s. And, you know, because of his deprivation, you know, at Claire Foundation and not having shoes, he became a sneakerhead. I don't know if you know what a sneakerhead is, but he had a collection of over 150 pairs of shoes. And his whole bedroom was filled from floor to ceiling with boxes of Nikes in every color and every style, and, you know, Adidas, Puma, you name it. And he was like in this crisis, and he couldn't sleep, and he looked over at his shoes, and, you know, he thought, what am I doing with so many shoes? Why do I have so many shoes? He said, I wear about 5 pairs of them, and there are people out there that don't have any shoes at all. So he decided that he would give away his shoes, a big chunk of his collection. And that was like over 6 years ago. And so he started a nonprofit. He drove around LA at first, giving out some of his collection of shoes to people that didn't have any, to homeless. We've gone to at-risk where kids that have topped out of foster care and given out shoes to them. And so in 6 years, we've given out to over 25,000 pairs of shoes. We've had the support of NBA teams. We've had the support of Nike giving us shoes and donating us the shoes. And so it's like, if you would have taken a snapshot of us in the shelter, you know, me and my son, this mom on welfare, it would have like, oh, you know, another boring statistic, somebody, you know, but life is not a snapshot. We have choices, and based on the choices we make a difference, we make an impact. That woman that bought Ricky 2 pairs of shoes didn't do it because he was going to start a nonprofit. She had no idea. But our kindness, the things that we do for one another impact us. That he started that nonprofit, and I'm extremely proud of him. Have a soul. And so what you know, what I'm doing now during, like, you know, this COVID thing, it's like I, you know, try to maintain a spiritual foundation. I try to, you know, I pray, I meditate, I write. I think writing is a way of you know, healing a lot of the trauma that you know, you can't go back and change the past, but you can write about it. And when I started journaling initially, that you know, it was a way for me to metabolize my feelings, a way to you know, take the bullets out of the chamber, if you will, you know. And so my life, you know, I started working with alcoholics and addicts in a detox. And I began to see how all of my experience that I had been through, I could use it as a tool to help someone, you know, because when I would sit across from a client that was struggling, you know, detoxing, I knew what that felt like. I could access, you know, my own experience and share it with them, you know. And it's like the same thing happened to me when I went to juvenile hall to talk to the girls in juvenile hall. I could see how all of my experience, nothing needs to be wasted. Nothing needs to be wasted, that I could use my life experience as a tool to help somebody else. You know, when I was writing my book, I was really afraid of putting my story out there because I could no longer control, you know, who knew what, or, you know, I represent an adolescent treatment center, and, you know, I would go to marketing events, and, you know, people didn't know my past, you know. But once the book was out there, you'd meet them at a luncheon or a dinner, and they'd go, "Oh, I read your book." And suddenly they know everything about me, and, you know, I feel like naked. Okay, I feel so naked because I can't control what people, you know. And it was like, when I was writing it, it was like I had it came to me in meditation to write my book. And it was like, if, you know, I believe it's part of my purpose, but I was afraid to write it. I was afraid to expose myself. But, you know, when it was like writing, when I was sitting at the computer typing out, you know, the chapters, you know, I kept thinking about the girls in juvenile hall. I kept thinking about the women in jail, the women in prison. You know, I didn't have an example of anybody that I do now of women that have gotten out the other side, but I didn't then. So I'm writing it for them. I'm writing it for everybody that has, you know, regret, you know, for not being the best parent. I'm writing it for all of those girls that are locked up. And, you know, it was like, that was like the motivating factor. Like, I'm doing it for them. I want them to see that there is a way out. There is a way out. It might be like going through the eye of the needle, but there's a way out. So I kept calling on the universe to help. I can't do this. Write it through me. And, you know, I could not have imagined my life, you know, when I was sitting in the county jail as a published author, as somebody that would be involved in such an amazing nonprofit with my son, making an impact on people. I could not have imagined my life like this. You know, if somebody would have said in my cell, "Wendy, just hang in there. Someday you're going to travel all over the country. Someday you're going to go swim with dolphins in Hawaii. One day you're going to go to Costa Rica and you're going to stand by a volcano." What the hell are you talking about? You know, girl, It's, you know, I could not have seen my life like it is today. I wasn't there doing research, but I have, like, as soon as the book was coming out, all of this shame started to percolate, you know, and I'm going, oh, what is this? I'm going to be exposed. I'm going to be naked. You know, I was conditioned to keep secrets. I'm a secret keeping machine. As a kid, I was, you know, I don't tell. But as soon as that book came out, and as soon as the shame didn't own me anymore. It didn't own me anymore. The shame was keeping me in a box, keeping me from taking risks, creative risks, or risks with just risks. But as soon as I pushed back the boundaries, the limitations that I had placed on myself, it was like rewiring the brain, you know, the neural pathways in the brain that had been constructed during trauma. It was contrary action. It was contrary action. So it's like my life does not look at all like it did some 27 years ago. And I attribute that to the kindness of a lot of people that believed in me, that supported me. I attribute it to God, higher power, consciousness, this grace that I did not know was available to me. You know, I did not know it was there. But it's like, I mean, being in these challenging times, I know that like when the COVID first hit, it's like I can see when my trauma is activated. I can feel it now. I recognize it for what it is. It doesn't have the charge over me that it used to have. The charge when I was first getting sober, I couldn't even pick out a cereal like when I was without having a panic attack. It's like Cocoa Krispies, cornflakes. What has the most nourishment for my kid? And I'd be in the cereal aisle going, oh, panic attack, get me out of here, and go out of the market. No Cocoa Pebbles, no Cocoa Krispies, no cornflakes, nothing. You know, and it was like, it's like, so I started like working on myself, and I started to find ways to metabolize these you know, these emotions, and started taking the charge, like listening to my story. Stop speaking victimese, Wendy. Drop the rocks and swim for the surface, you know? And I mean, like you know, when this virus hit, you know, it was like that amygdala, that overactive amygdala of mine started, whoops, you know, being on high alert, you know, again, growing up in a childhood where I was always on high alert. So what do? I breathe, I pray, I exercise, I connect with my peers. You know, I write down my fears. I write down my fears because that gets it out of me and onto the paper, gets it out of me onto the paper. And if I share it with somebody, it's even better, you know, because I'm unloading the gun, taking the bullets out of the chamber. Otherwise, I'm a loaded gun walking around the city, don't know who I'm going to fire at. So, you know, I found so many tools and so many ways to live life when I didn't know how to live life, you know, and it's like, I believe in the power of recovery, but you have to ask for help. You have to ask for help. You have to say, I can't do this alone, and you don't have to do it alone. There are people out there that will help you. It's like I was a little hamster running off the hands of something that kept catching me. I'd run and run and run, and something was a presence that was always there. And it works through people, and it just, you know, stay close during these challenging times. I'm really grateful that you had me as a guest today, and I wanted to leave some time for questions if we have time. Michaela, thank you.
Yes, we do have time for questions. If you have any for Wendy, you can put them in the Q&A box, and we will give you a minute or two to get those in. Well, Wendy, we have a lot of people thanking you for your presentation. We have one question asking if you ever talk about codependence or think about it in relation to your recovery.
Yeah, I think that codependency was a big reason why I couldn't walk away from my marriage. And, you know, a codependency because I depended so much on the way other people saw me, you know, that I really hit a bottom in recovery with my codependency because I started seeing how I had lack of boundaries. And, you know, I started overcommitting so much when I first got sober that I was doing all of these things for everybody because I wanted to just be all of that. And then I started like burning out. And a really wise person told me, you know, Wendy, when people are asking you things, you know, you have a choice. You have a choice. If you, before you say yes, you know, before you tell them yes, you can do it, think about if you have a choice between feeling guilty or feeling resentful, go with feeling guilty, because you're going to start feeling guilty when you say no to people. You're going to feel resentful when you are saying yes to people that you don't want to say yes to. So I had to start learning how to say no, you know, to people when I couldn't do something, and setting like strong internal boundaries. And I think that working with addicts and alcoholics, I started learning how not to lose myself, you know, not how to like keep internal boundaries, and just got better. I just practiced, you know, setting boundaries, because it's, you know, we learn. It's like, I make mistakes, I learn from them. As long as I'm awake, as long as I'm sober, I feel like I can learn from my mistakes.
So we have another question asking if you have any advice for somebody who might be in active addiction right now, but is considering how they might start their recovery journey.
So I went to meetings, and I raised my hand and I said, I can't do this. You know, I need help. You know, I'm scared. And, you know, it depends. I mean, there's like, depends on what options are available to you, whether you have resources for, you know, counseling, whether you have resources for treatment, you know, but it starts with just, I think, asking for help. It's like you take one step in the right direction and trust there'll be somebody to walk you the next two.
Well, I think that's all we have. We did get a few questions about just how they can contact you and where to get your books. So for everyone that's interested, I'm going to put Wendy's website in the chat box so you can have that to look at later. And I think Sherry's going to wrap us up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. What a wonderful story. We really appreciate it. I also want to thank both Anthony and Lori again as well. Very much appreciate their stories, appreciate everything they're doing. I think we're very lucky to have this opportunity to do these recovery stories. And I want to tell you that we will be having another session in November. On November 20th, we're going to have a panel of veterans in recovery to talk about their experience with trauma and mental illness. So we'd really love to have you there. We're also going to have another session in December, so you can set it aside, December 15th, at which time we'll be hearing from Ryan Gottfriedson, who wrote the book Success Mindset, and he's going to talk about skills that you can utilize in your recovery to help you move forward. At both of them, we'll also continue to have recovery stories from folks from Ohio, so you can hear more about what folks in Ohio are doing from recovery. So we really encourage you to stick with us and attend events. I would also say that if you want to send us some suggestions of speakers, or if you have ideas that we could do in future months, feel free to send those to us. We'd love to hear from you about your thoughts. The other thing we want to talk about, as you know, if you ever came to our recovery conference, and we all love the recovery conferences, we like to give things away. We love to give things away. So what we're going to do is we're going to offer the opportunity to get a free Echo Dot. What we're asking is if you send us a written story, or you can send us a video story. They can be very short. They don't need to be really long. We will enter you to win an Echo Dot. And in all of our conferences, our video conferences, what we're going to be doing is offering the opportunity to send us stories, and then we will announce at the next conference who the winner is, and we will mail them off to you. So we're really looking forward to this. So you know, if you can send us your written story again, or you can put them on video and send them to us, we will announce the winner. More details about how to submit your story will be emailed to each of you, so you have an address where to send them, both whether they're a written email story or if it's a video story. So we will get that out to you. It will be mailed as soon as our conference is over today. So again, I want to thank Wendy. I want to thank Anthony. I want to thank Lori. I think we've had a great inaugural video recovery session, and we look forward to seeing you all in November. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. And remember, recovery is beautiful. Thank you. Bye-bye.